In January of 1066, England lost its king. Edward the Confessor died without a clear heir. That single fact created a problem far larger than most people at the time fully understood. England was stable, wealthy, and strategically important. Whoever controlled it would not only hold a crown, but influence over trade, land, and power across northern Europe. The throne did not remain empty for long. Harald Godwinson, the most powerful noble in England, was crowned king almost immediately. He was experienced, respected by many, and already a central figure in English politics. To those within England, the decision appeared practical. The kingdom needed continuity, not uncertainty. But beyond England's shores. Others saw the situation differently. William, Duke of Normandy, claimed that Edward had once promised him the English throne. He also believed that Harold had sworn an oath supporting that claim during a previous visit to Normandy. Whether that oath was freely given or forced under pressure is still debated. What mattered was that William believed he had been betrayed. Across the North Sea, another claimant emerged. Harald Hardrada of Norway, a seasoned warrior king, also asserted his right to rule England. His claim traced back to older agreements between Scandinavian and English rulers. Unlike William, Hardrada did not prepare through diplomacy. He prepared through invasion. Suddenly, England faced not one challenge, but two. Harald Godwinson understood the danger clearly. He organized defenses along the southern coast, expecting William's fleet to cross the channel at any moment. Weeks passed. Winds held the Norman ships in port. The invasion did not come. Then news arrived from the north. Harald Hardrada had landed in England with a powerful Viking force. He was joined by Harold's own brother, Tostig, who had his own grievances against the English crown. Together, they defeated local forces and moved inland. Harald Godwinson made a decisive choice. Instead of waiting for William in the south, he marched his army north quickly, covering extraordinary distance in a matter of days. His forces met the Norwegians at Stamford Bridge in September 1066. The battle was fierce and personal. Harold's army prevailed. Hardrada was killed. The northern threat ended, but victory came at a cost. The English army was exhausted. Many soldiers had marched hundreds of miles in a short period. Supplies were stretched thin. There was little time to rest. Almost immediately after Stamford Bridge, word arrived that William had finally crossed the Channel. The Norman fleet had landed on England's southern coast near Pevensey. Harold faced a second decision. He could remain in the north, regroup, and build strength, or he could march south immediately to confront William before the Normans secured a stronger foothold. He chose speed again. For the second time in weeks, the English army marched across the length of the country. Fatigue was unavoidable. Reinforcements were limited. But Harold likely believed momentum favored him. He had defeated one invader already. Another could be dealt with before it gained traction. William, meanwhile, was not rushing blindly inland. He fortified his landing position, secured supplies, and allowed his men to recover from the sea crossing. He understood that Harold would come to him. England could not afford to let an enemy move freely. The stage was set for confrontation. The two armies were different in structure and style. Harold's forces consisted largely of infantry, professional housecarls at the center, supported by local militia known as the Fired. They were disciplined but mostly fought on foot. Their primary defense was the shield wall, a tight formation designed to absorb and repel attacks. William's army was more varied. It included infantry, archers, and cavalry. Norman knights were experienced in mounted warfare, trained to maneuver and strike with speed. This flexibility gave William options Harold did not possess. By mid-October, the English army reached a ridge near Hastings. The ground sloped downward toward the Norman position. Harold took the high ground, a strong defensive choice. On October 14, 1066, the two armies faced each other. The English shield wall formed along the ridge. Shields overlapped. Spears angled forward. The formation was dense and deliberate. Below them, the Normans organized in divisions, archers in front, infantry behind, cavalry positioned to exploit openings. Both leaders understood what was at stake. For Harold, defeat meant more than personal loss. It meant the end of his dynasty, perhaps the end of Anglo-Saxon rule entirely. For William, failure would leave him stranded in hostile territory far from Normandy. The wind moved across the ridge. Banners lifted and settled. Orders were given quietly. England would not be decided through negotiation. It would be decided on that hill. And when the first arrows were released, the fate of a kingdom began to shift. When the battle began on the morning of October 14th, it did not erupt in chaos. It unfolded in layers. William ordered his archers forward first. Arrows rose into the sky and fell against the English shield wall. Many struck shields. Some found gaps. But the position on the ridge worked in Harold's favor. The angle reduced the impact. The line held firm. Behind the archers, Norman infantry advanced uphill. The climb itself slowed them. Armor grew heavier with each step. The English waited until they were close enough to engage properly. Then the first true collision came. The shield wall absorbed the impact with discipline. English housecarls, armed with heavy axes, struck downward with force. Norman infantry pushed upward, attempting to break cohesion. But the slope made coordination difficult. Each step required effort. Each retreat risked falling back into those behind. The battle was not fluid. It was compressed. For hours, the pattern repeated. Normans attacked. The shield wall resisted. The English line did not chase recklessly. They understood their advantage. Height, formation, and unity. William faced a growing problem. If the shield wall remained intact, the battle would stall. Time favored Harold, who only needed to deny victory long enough to exhaust the invading force. At one point during the fighting, confusion spread through the Norman ranks. A rumor moved quickly. William had been killed. Units began to fall back. Some turned to retreat. It was a dangerous moment. William reacted immediately. He rode forward, removed his helmet so his men could see his face, and rallied them. The message was clear. He was alive and the battle was not lost. The retreat stopped. But something important had just happened. During that brief withdrawal, parts of the English line pursued downhill, breaking formation, whether from overconfidence or misunderstanding. Some English fighters chased the retreating Normans. William saw the opportunity. Norman cavalry regrouped and turned. The isolated English soldiers were cut down. The lesson was immediate. Discipline must not be broken. The battle continued. William began using controlled feigned retreats. Deliberate withdrawals meant to draw parts of the shield wall out of position. Each time English fighters broke formation to pursue, Norman cavalry responded swiftly. Not every attempt worked. The shield wall still held across most of the ridge. But slowly, carefully, the structure began to weaken. Archers were repositioned. Instead of firing directly forward, they began angling arrows higher, allowing them to drop into the English line from above. Shields designed to block frontal assault were less effective against descending fire. Casualties increased. The English remained determined, but fatigue crept in. Many had marched long distances in recent weeks. They had already fought at Stamford Bridge. Endurance, once an advantage, now became a strain. As the afternoon wore on, gaps began to appear. It did not happen suddenly. There was no dramatic collapse. Instead, small openings formed where men fell and could not be replaced quickly enough. Norman infantry pressed harder. Cavalry exploited weak points. The slope that had once favored the English became less decisive as the shield wall thinned. Then came the moment that history remembers most. King Harold was struck down. Accounts differ on the exact details. Some describe an arrow to the eye. Others suggest he fell in close combat. What is certain is that Harold died before the battle ended. The effect was immediate. Without their king, the English position lost cohesion. Leadership at the center dissolved. What had been a unified line became fragmented resistance. Norman forces surged forward. By evening, the ridge was no longer defended. The English army broke. Some fled. Others fought to the end. But the structure that had held for most of the day was gone. The field belonged to William. The battle had lasted nearly the entire day, far longer than many had expected. It had not been a simple victory of force. It had been a test of adaptation. William had adjusted tactics when direct assault failed. He had used flexibility against rigidity. He had turned small mistakes into larger openings. Hastings was not decided in the first hour. It was decided in the last dot, and with Harold's death, England's future shifted permanently. When the sun set on October 14, 1066, the battlefield near Hastings was quiet, but England was no longer the same country. William had won the field, but he had not yet won the kingdom. Victory in battle does not automatically become control of a nation. William still faced resistance, uncertainty, and the challenge of ruling a land that had not invited him. Yet one fact shaped everything that followed. Harold was dead, with the English king gone. There was no clear leader to rally around. Some nobles attempted to name another successor. Others considered negotiation. But the unity that might have resisted William effectively had already fractured. William moved carefully. He did not rush blindly toward London. Instead, he secured key positions along the southern coast and advanced strategically, reinforcing his supply lines and demonstrating strength where needed. Towns that resisted were punished. Towns that submitted were spared. This was not random cruelty. It was calculated pressure. The message was simple. Resistance would be costly. As William approached London, support for continued opposition weakened. The English elite understood the situation clearly. The army that could have defended the kingdom had fallen at Hastings. Rebuilding it quickly was impossible. By Christmas Day 1066, William was crowned King of England. The ceremony itself symbolized a transfer of power, but the transformation had only begun. The Norman conquest reshaped England in ways that extended far beyond leadership. First, land ownership changed dramatically. William redistributed English estates to his Norman followers. Anglo-Saxon nobles were replaced with Norman lords. This was not temporary. It altered the structure of power permanently. Second, language began to shift. Old English remained spoken among common people, but the ruling class spoke Norman French. Over time, the blending of these languages produced the foundation of modern English. Words of law, governance, and nobility carried Norman influence. Even today, that linguistic divide can be traced back to Hastings. Third, military structure evolved. Norman castles appeared across England, not just as defensive structures, but as symbols of control. Stone fortifications rose where wooden halls once stood. The physical landscape reflected political change. Hastings was not simply a battle between two men. It marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule and the beginning of Norman governance. Yet it is important to understand what Hastings was not. It was not inevitable. Harold had already defeated one invasion earlier that year. If winds had delayed William longer, if the English army had more time to rest, if the shield wall had held just a little longer, history might have unfolded differently. The battle's outcome rested on decisions made under pressure. Harold chose speed over recovery. William chose adaptation over stubborn assault. Those choices shaped the result. In the years that followed, William ruled firmly. Rebellions were suppressed. Northern regions faced harsh campaigns to eliminate resistance. Order was established, but at a price. England became more connected to continental Europe. Trade expanded. Administrative systems strengthened. The Domesday Book, commissioned by William, recorded land and resources in extraordinary detail, reflecting a new level of centralized authority. All of it traces back to that ridge near Hastings. When people remember 1066, they often reduce it to a single image: a king struck down, a crown claimed, a conqueror rising. But the true significance of Hastings lies in its consequences. It redefined governance. It reshaped society. It altered culture and language. Few battles have changed a nation so completely in a single day. Hastings reminds us that military victory is rarely the end of a story. It is the beginning of transformation. William did not simply defeat Harold. He replaced an entire ruling system, and in doing so, he set England on a path that would influence centuries of history. This was not legend. It was transition. It was war before it became legend.